My job today is to kind of go over the nuts and bolts of the options that we're going to give each and every one of you to go back and give to your staffs. And you can look up here where it says alert, run, hide, and fight. And I don't want you to think about these options as a linear type program, okay? It's not like they teach you when you catch on fire where you stop, drop, and roll, and you do it in that order. These things are all going to be happening maybe at the same time, maybe out of order, but they're all things that will happen during an active shooter incident. The first one is alert, probably one of the most important things, and that's letting people know what's going on. And we have to give people as much information when something like this occurs as we possibly can. It says up here that information is the key to good decisions. You're going to see that later when we talk about the other options that you have besides hiding underneath a desk. The idea of this is to provide as much intel as possible. You're going to see a map here in a minute and kind of what our current policy is and what probably many of your policies are for lockdown drills. When we talk about alerting, I want you to think about alerting people before the incident, during the incident, and after the incident, okay? And giving information out during those times. We talk about alerting before the incident. Obviously, we can't predict these things that are going to happen. But if something like this is going to occur, we do want to give information out there to our parents of how we want them to respond. Now, that's not going to solve all of our problems. Not all of our parents are going to respond in a rational way. This is a very irrational event. But the more training we can do, the safer the children are going to be, and I'll tell you why. Let's talk about Taft for a minute. In our task force, we had the opportunity to talk to one of the employees at the Taft incident, and John and I have talked to some of the first responders out in Taft and the FBI and the Sheriff's Department. And one of the biggest problems out there, which you can imagine, was that when word got out, and it got out very quickly, that there was a shooting at the high school, the parents clogged up the streets. The law enforcement had a difficult time getting into the high school because of the parents. They wanted to get there and get their child out. Well, that did a couple different things. One, it put the parents in danger because now you have adults trying to get onto the campus when you have an active shooter. Two, you're delaying the response time. And if you remember back to that slide, minutes equal lives. 2 to 4 people shot every minute. The more the parents delay that response, the more people that are shot, the more people that are killed. So in the Norris School District, maybe in your school district, we have parent education nights. And most of the time we do parent education nights on kindergarten readiness, homework, things of that nature. But this is also an important topic of where you want those parents to respond to. Telling those parents, this is where you're going to get your child back the quickest. This is how you're going to help your child be the safest. This is how you're going to be the safest during one of these incidents. Then you want to talk about alerting during an incident. There's different ways that you can do this. You have from PA systems that you do your morning announcements on. We're in the process right now of training each teacher and in-servicing them on how to do an all-call. Most of those all-calls usually come from the office or the principal. We do our morning announcements in the Norris School District. We do the flag salute every morning. But they have that option. And so we're training them to do that only in an emergency because, again, that gives us more information. It's quicker. The shooter may not always come through the office. Maybe they jump a fence in the back where someone else is going to see them. We don't want to create a situation, again, minutes equal lives, where the teacher then has to see what's going on and say, oh, that doesn't look right. I better call the office and let somebody know. Call the office. Can you tell Mr. Wyrather, who gets a hold of the secretary, that there's a stranger out there on the campus? The secretary then has to call me or interrupt a meeting that I'm in. That's too long. We want the information to get out there as quickly as possible. There's also alerting and information after an incident is over. Some of you may have the capability of sending out announcements through your phone system, robocalls, text messages. There's lots of different programs out there, but you need to be thinking about ways that you can, let parents know what's going on. That's going to help the law enforcement. It's going to help you facilitate the return of those kids. Here's a map of a school, and like I said, the policy right now for many of you probably is to say, get on the intercom and say, lockdown, lockdown. Not that long ago, you used to have code words. Ours used to be, Dr. Cotton, please come to the office. Well, that's great, and I think that was meant to maybe confuse the shooter or the intruder. But if you have, like in our district back then, a couple guys with doctorate degrees, or if you have some ladies with doctorate degrees that are superintendents, they may be confused. You're teaching, and did they say Dr. Perucci, or did they say, Dr. Cotton? Who was that? We don't want people to be confused. So we switched it. We went to, let's just say we're going to lock down. There's an intruder on campus. Lockdown, lockdown. What does that tell us? If you heard that on the announcement, what does that tell you? There's an intruder. Yeah. Where? Is it an intruder? Is it a shooter? Is it, where are they? I mean, what does that really mean? One, it would scare the hell out of us, probably. But it doesn't really tell us where the person is, who the person is. Is it an angry parent who's kind of getting out of control in the office? Or is it someone coming down the hallway with a gun with the intent to kill children? We don't know. We want to switch lockdown, lockdown to lockdown, lockdown, gunman in the administrative office, okay? Gunman in the office, gunman in the library. You want to be as specific as possible. You may even add what they look like, or if you know who they are. That tells us a couple different things. Later when we talk about evacuating and running, that information is critical. It's critical. Because if I'm this teacher in room 38 over here, God, I had a laser pen. Okay, if I'm this teacher right here, and this campus, I know this campus very well because it's mine. It's an 18-acre campus. There's a lot of space between the office and room 38. There's also a gate right here. Remember that picture that John showed you of the library at Columbine? If I hear that there's a lockdown and there's a gunman in the office, this teacher and their kids can go out that gate, and they're in the neighborhood, and they survive. Even if you're pretty close here, there's a lot of space and a lot of room between room 17 in these rooms and that office. They would have a chance to escape. If I'm right next to the office in the library, or maybe room 1, I'm probably not going to poke my head out the door, okay? That's close. I better be thinking about barricading, and we'll go over that in a little bit, or any other alternate exits that I can get out of. This one's lucky, it has a back door. We can go out to this parking lot, and maybe not even to this parking lot, maybe out here down the street. You want to get them to safety. We need to know that information. We need to know where the gunman is. We'd like to know what they look like. As much intelligence as possible. And I know that some people are going to say, well, the gunman's going to hear you. We'll talk about that in a second. Object impermanence. The idea of object impermanence is this. You know, remember as a kid, and some of you may have children, and they cover their eyes, and they think if they cover their eyes that you can't see them. Okay? This is this whole idea. That if I hide and cover my eyes, the gunman's not going to see me. But that's not the case. It's also the idea if we let the gunman, if we get on the say the gunman's in the admin office, we're going to let the gunman know where he is. Well, the gunman knows where he is. He's the gunman. Okay? It's not going to make a difference for what his plan is. It's not going to change his mind as to what he's going to do. We want him to know that we know where he is. We want him to know that everybody knows what he looks like. Evacuate equals run. Now, this is very common sense, okay? Think back to whatever you've told your own child. They see a stranger. Some stranger comes up and wants to take them. What do you tell them to do? Run. Run away. This is very common sense stuff. But in teaching, it's kind of a controversial idea because we are so used to keeping track of each and every kid. We count them on the field trip before they go on the bus. Man, we hate to lose a kid on a field trip. That's a nightmare, right? We count them when they get on the bus. We count them when they get off the bus, okay? On a fire drill, they count on the slips, make sure everyone's accounted for. because we got to get those emergency cards so that in case there's an real emergency, we can check them out and they can go home. We're always counting kids. We take roll every morning. We're so concerned that we're going to lose somebody. Even at the end of the day, when if we can't find somebody, that's a catastrophe at a school. Both John and I, our wives are in teaching at different school districts. And when we talked to them about this, they both had a very similar response, which is, you're going to tell the kids to run? Oh my God, where are they going to go? How would we find them? Where are they going to go? But in an active shooter situation, you'll find them. Okay? We know where they live. We have their address. We know that when we do find them and they've run off the campus, that we're going to find them alive. I'll talk about that here in just a second. If you look up here, this is a pretty upsetting picture. It's because these people are no longer with us. Those are just some of the people from Sandy Hook Elementary School. And in trainings that John and I have gone to where we've had law enforcement and people that train with different programs like these, I can tell you that every time they talk about it, they got a little shook up. This is a horrific event. Unimaginable to think that somebody would come in and shoot 6-year-olds, one after the other. The thing about Sandy Hook, though, is that there were some people that survived. One of them was a 6-year-old boy. Again, a 6-year-old boy who didn't have any training. And he walked into the classroom while Adam Lanza was shooting at his classmates who were huddled in a corner, the teacher protecting them. And he ran in, saw what was happening, grabbed a couple of his buddies, and ran past the shooter, out of the school, into a neighborhood. And he lived. So did his buddies. His classmates did not. Some people are going to tell you, well, what happens if they run into another shooter? Just a statistic here for you. Only 2% of violent intruder events have been more than one person. It's not likely to happen. It's really not. The idea of evacuating is if he's inside, you get outside. If the bad guy is on this right here, you're running the other way. You want to get away from the danger. The kids will take direction from the teacher. If the teacher says run out that door, the kids will run out that door. Okay? If they say run out this door, the students will follow. We teach kids to listen to the teacher's directives during an emergency situation. Leave your belongings behind. Belongings aren't important. It's just like in a fire, okay? I mean, I know that we put this on here only for the fact that what we see in some of these shooter incidents is that teachers, administrators, employees get so concerned about their belongings, their purse, their car keys, their classroom keys. At Taft High School, when we were talking to the FBI agents that were helping clear the rooms, there were a couple people that refused to give their keys up to the FBI agents so they could go into the rooms. And we had a good chuckle over that, but again, teachers are rule followers. Okay? They were told, don't give your key to anybody. And they took that seriously. They didn't even want to give it to the FBI. So during these incidents, you have to remember, belongings aren't important, and you're going to be taking direction, and we're going to get into this a little bit later, from the law enforcement, because they're going to be in control of that incident, not the school. Hiding or locking down or barricading. This is probably the policy of most every district that's in here currently. Okay? When we say lockdown, we mean lock the doors, turn off the lights, and keep the kids quiet and get underneath the desk. Okay? And I will stand here and tell you that that is an option. It's absolutely an option. It can be a good option sometimes, but it can't be the only option. If we are going to do it, you do want to do it right and give yourself the best chance. Because I can tell you that just being underneath the desk, the ballistic quality of a desk and being able to stop a bullet, an atomic bomb, the ceiling crashing down during an earthquake, I hate to break it to you because we've been taught this our whole lives since we've been in school, this doesn't offer a lot of protection. It just doesn't. Bullets go through desks. Ceilings probably go through desks. I won't even mention the atomic bomb. That's not going to help us either. When we talk about barricading, our classrooms today, depending on what school and that you are working for, we kind of live in a glass box. Okay, at my particular school, there's a lot of windows, and they're not great places to barricade in. They're not great places at stopping people with weapons. So you kind of have to think about that. Again, that's why this can only be one option, and why sometimes evacuating is a better option. But there are ways to barricade that we can get a little bit more creative than just by locking the door. Out of curiosity, how many of you do you know of you at your school you can lock the door from the inside? That's good. And that's not even, here's the shocking thing. It's not the whole room. We still have, after all these school shootings, classrooms where you have to go outside the door, lock the door, and then come back inside. And during one of these incidents, who wants to do that? Who wants to go outside, especially if you don't know where the gunman is? So locking from the inside is a good option. In our school district, we currently have the doors locked all the time. Classroom doors are locked. Okay, does that provide a little bit of an inconvenience? It does. It does, but we work around that because we think safety is more important. Okay. Locking a door is a good option, but it can't be the only option. There's sometimes when you can't lock the door. There's doors that swing in, and there's doors that swing out. So we want to show you today just a few ideas, and you're going to see them, you're going to be like, oh, that makes sense, of what you can do. Okay? John, you want to assist me? In this room, we've got two exits here, and both of these are outward swinging doors. You see John taking off his belt here. Most outward swinging doors have this arm up here. Okay? A great place to wrap your belt around that prevents the door from opening. I will tell you that if someone really wants to get in and they're tugging, even if you put that belt on there and you're holding the door, belts do break. But you have to get creative. Okay? That can provide you with time. Again, minutes equal lives. It can provide somewhat of resistance and can aid you in holding the door shut, or it might prevent it from opening enough with the addition of putting a barricade in front. If you see this right here, this picture, this isn't just moving, in this particular instance, one desk in front of the door. They piled stuff in front of that door. And why did they do it? John mentioned this earlier. These types of shooting incidents are very much crimes of convenience. Okay? They want it to be easy. They want easy targets. And the whole point of this training and giving you options is to make harder targets out of each and every one of you. So, when we say barricade, it's not just putting a chair up in front of the door, it's barricading the door. Outward swinging door is difficult, okay? But a shooter may not want to mess with that when he opens the door. He's going to want to go to the room that he can just walk in and shoot. A belt can be an option. What about an inward swinging door? John, if you want to assist here. And we can go this one. Want to turn around? If we say this was an inward swinging door over here, John here is on the floor. He's got his feet up against the door. He's low to the ground, which is important because, again, the ballistic quality of a door, even though this is a metal door, probably not great. A round's going to go through there. We saw that at Virginia Tech. Very brave men. They lost their lives. They saved a lot. But the bullets will come through the door. When he's on the ground right there, I'll make you get down there one more time, right, just for fun.
That's all right.
Okay. What's great about this room is that it's carpeted. There's a lot of friction now on his body. And I will tell you that in the training that we went to, we had a pretty big guy as an intruder. Okay, he was 200 plus pounds. And we had a little guy who was an SRO from Yakima, Washington. And he was on the ground just like John was right there. And that guy couldn't open the door. He would get it open just a little bit, but there was so much friction there for him to be able to move that body that he wasn't able to get in. You get two people on the ground, even better. Okay? Better than just trying to put your body up and exposing all of your body up against the door. Another option that you can do, let's say this door right here, which a lot of people have these handles, okay? If this were, I want to show the belt technique with this. We talked about using the belt on the arm as an aid to help you keep the door shut. You can also use it around these handles too, and we'll show you where to stand. There's a difference, guys, between what we call cover and concealment. Okay? When you're being shot at, concealment is you being out of the sight of the shooter. They can't see you. Doesn't mean that you're safe. It means they can't see you and you're a harder target. Cover is getting behind something that has some ballistic quality to it that might be able to stop, maybe you're behind a concrete ball wall or something like that. So again, you want to try to be out of the line of fire. John here is grabbing his belt. Okay, he's off to the side. He's holding onto the belt. Again, is this going to prevent the door from opening completely? No. But it does make it more difficult than to open the door. Making it difficult is the key. When it's difficult, they know they only have so much time before law enforcement arrives. And what we see in these incidents is that when law enforcement arrives, the following happens. They end their own lives. They're there to die. And they commit suicide. Okay? If they don't, law enforcement neutralizes the intruder. Okay? A high percentage of these end that way. So, again, that's just another technique to buy some time. Fighting or countering. Probably the most controversial policy change, if you want to put it into policy, that you would face. Again, it seems to make sense. If you were anywhere else by yourself, and it was the difference between you fighting back or them taking your life, I would think that quite a few of you might fight for your life. But when it comes to a school setting, it's a little bit different. Okay? I want to make something clear, is that we are not training kindergartners, we're not training first graders to be little ninjas and to attack and swarm an intruder with a gun. That's crazy. Okay? We would never do that. But we are talking about disrupting a shooter, distracting a shooter, and making it difficult for them to hit their target. Look at this little table right here. Here's a picture of Cho. That's an actual picture of him that he took, I think, before, I think he sent that to the news. That was the Virginia Tech shooter. In shooting incidents, you have police officers who have a high amount of skill. A high amount of skill. They train all the time. They hit their target, roughly, in shooting incidents, about 20% of the time. It varies, but on average, about 20% of the time. School shooters who have a very low skill tend to have about a 50% hit rate. What's the difference? Stationary targets, range. Police officers are shooting at people that are running from them, running at them, shooting back at them. They're moving all over the place. They're fighting back. It's very difficult. There's a saying that when you talk about the accuracy of shooting, you can take an Olympic gold medalist shooter who, at 100 yards, could shoot a fly off of a cow's nose, but give that cow a gun and see how accurate he is. Changes things, okay? Cho, as John said earlier, he was shooting at people that were on the ground. They weren't moving at all. Sandy Hook Elementary, all piled together in a corner of the room. Nobody moving. Hunkered down on the ground. Easy targets. Easy to shoot into that group of people. Even today, a lot of our schools, if they're out on the playground, think about what your policy is. If someone were to come on campus, your policy may be to blow a whistle and have them drop to the ground. Easy targets. They're not moving. They're right there for a shooter to shoot at. Okay? We want to disrupt that shooter. We want to distract that shooter so that that hit rate goes down and looks more like this, what the cops have to face. I'm going to show you a video. It says John Hessel. John Hessel was a city attorney in Kirkwood at a city council meeting. John Hessel didn't have any training as to what to do during a shooting event. He was at a city council meeting when a disgruntled, I think, former city employee came in and began to shoot. This video is his account of what happened and basically how he survived that incident. And 7 people did not.
Walk me through what happened when you first heard Cookie.
I was looking down because we were just starting a public hearing and I was entering exhibits into the record. So I didn't see him enter the council chambers. I heard his voice and I looked up and he was to my left. He was standing a foot or 2 away from Officer Tom Ballman, who was sitting in a chair up against the wall. He had a placard in his hand, and I didn't see what it said or anything, because when I looked up, he immediately dropped his placard. I saw he had 2 guns in his hand. He was shouting something. I didn't understand what he was saying, and he immediately shot Officer Ballman. I then ducked underneath the DS. And I remember Art McDonald ducking underneath the Diaz, Tim Griffin. I heard other shots, did not see what happened. I then saw Mayor Swoboda walk behind me and go from my left to my right. And I heard a shot, I saw him fall. I saw that he was bleeding from the head. I then heard additional shots to my right, and they sounded very close. And I believed he was just going down the Diaz and shooting people. And I believed that he was coming after me. So I got up and I ran. And I ran to my left and then was heading towards the front door. And I looked out and saw in my peripheral vision that he was coming towards the front door as well, chasing after me. And we got about 2/3 of the way towards the end of the council chambers, towards the door, and he was about 4 feet away from me, stopping my passage to the door with both guns aimed right at me. So I picked up a chair and I threw it at him, and I was lucky enough where it hit him and the guns moved to his right, away from me. So I then took a couple steps closer towards him and picked up another chair and hit him with it as hard as I could. I then threw a 3rd chair at him as I started to go back the way I came, thinking that I would go back out a back door. And I saw that door was closed. I don't know if it was locked. I didn't know if I'd have time to open a door. And I remember stepping over Ken Yost's body. So I then went to my left, thinking that there was another door over there, and I looked behind me, and Cookie Thornton was chasing me, and I saw him trip and fall over Ken Yost's body. When I saw him go down, I thought, well, I got a better chance, so I then went back towards the front of the council chambers and out the door. As I hit the steps, 2 officers were coming up the steps. They were literally at the top of the steps when I was taking my first step onto the steps. Went down the steps, out the door, and heard initial gunfire. And based upon what I now know, I don't know if, I know they shot Cookie Thornton.
Walk through with us, yeah.
I was sitting here. As you can see, Mayor Swoboda was there. Councilmember McDonald was here. When I saw Cookie Thornton, he was standing right there. Officer Ballman was right there. He was only about a foot. That's when he dropped his placard and immediately shot Officer Ballman. I then went underneath the DS. heard shots. Then I saw Mayor Swoboda walking this way, and I saw him fall, and I saw him bleeding from the head when he was laying right there. I then later on heard shots over this way, which would have been again to my right, and they sounded like they were getting closer to me, so I got up and ran this way. Ken Yo's body was right there. Tom Ballman's body was still in the chair. Ran here, hoping to get to the door. When I got to about here, Cookie Thornton had come from here and was right there. And that's where I threw the chair at him, and then hit him with the chair, and then threw another chair at him. And then I ran back this way, throwing chairs behind me as I went, hoping to block him, hoping that I was going to go through a doorway that was here. That's the door that appeared to be closed. So then I started going this way, thinking I might head for that door. And that's when I looked back, when I was about here, I looked back and I saw that he had stumbled and fallen over Ken Yo's body, I believe. So then I decided to go this way out the front door. The steps were right here. After I got out the door.
John Hessel had a lot of different reactions during that incident. In fact, I think he had all three that we talked about. Initially, when it happened, as many of us would be, he was shocked. He ducked down, he hid. Okay? Very common reaction. He then realized very quickly what the shooter was doing, which was going down at the people that were hunkered down and shooting them, just like we've seen in these other incidents, like Virginia Tech, Sandy Hook. And he did not want to die. That's the question that it comes down to. That's really what it comes down to for each and every one of us. He did not want to die that day. He wanted to live. He wanted to go home to his family. Think about your family. I'm newly married. Just got married a couple weeks ago, so I still have something to live for, I guess. I'm only been married a couple weeks, so I would still like to live. Okay. He then got up and he ran. Okay. Another thing that we talked about, flight. He tried to get away. When that didn't work and he was faced with a shooter, he didn't sit there and give up. He fought back. His instincts kicked in. He threw 3 chairs at the guy. That disrupted the shots, bought him some time. He ran again. That's what saved that guy's life. He could have been like the other people that died and hunkered down and did nothing, but he chose to live. We talk about fighting or countering. Again, I want to emphasize this is a last resort. Okay? This training doesn't give you a license as an administrator to go out there and take care of the problem on the campus. We're not asking you to do that. That would be silly. Okay? We're not training you to be a hero. We're not going to give you any tools to help you be Rambo. Okay? What we ultimately want to have happen is for the law enforcement in the back to come on campus and neutralize the threat. What we are training you to do is to buy yourself some time, and the time equals lives. We're going to demonstrate several different things. Before we do, I want to bring you down to the slide to this silly thing right here. It says OODA loop. It's kind of fun to say. It's actually an acronym. The OODA loop is something that each and every one of us who's ever shot a gun, okay, it's something that each law enforcement officer who is trained in using a weapon, it's a process that you go through in your mind. Okay? This goes back to Navy fighter pilots, okay, and they're finding their targets up in the sky. The OODA loop stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. That's a process someone goes through as they're coming in with a pistol. They're observing the situation. They have to orient themselves to the room, to their surroundings. They decide on a target, they act, and they shoot. We want to disrupt that OODA loop. That's the whole idea behind fighting and countering. You want to disrupt that OODA loop because the more you disrupt that OODA loop, that percentage of shots that hit the targets goes down. Okay? There's different ways you can do that. Noise is good. You might have just heard that noise over there. It's distracting, wasn't it? Noise is great. Okay? Yelling, screaming, big, loud, booming voice, okay? That distracts the shooter. Movement's a great one, okay? Moving around the room. Harder to hit a moving target than a stationary target. The more distance you have, the harder it is to hit your target. And anything that can distract the shooter, anything that can distract the shooter, and that could be things that you throw at them. It could be things, we're going to do a little demonstration here actually, okay? We have some tennis balls here, and we're not going to go through and think about a classroom, okay guys? A classroom is full of things that you could use as weapons or things to throw that are very distracting. Every room is a fire extinguisher, okay? Depending on what type of fire extinguisher it is, you spray that, that's distracting in someone's face. That's going to disrupt the OODA loop. You throw this, it's hard to pick up with one hand. It's heavy. This thing can do some damage. It's going to disrupt the OODA loop. Hole punch, okay? Make it a ninja star, whatever you want to do. It disrupts the OODA loop, okay? Even something as light as a box will disrupt that OODA loop and make it harder for that person to shoot. Your natural instinct when something's thrown at you most of the time is to duck or to blink or to protect your eyes, okay? Now we're not going to, for this little demonstration that we're going to show, we're not going to allow you to throw a fire extinguisher at me. I don't even really want you to throw the paper box at me, to be perfectly honest, okay? We are going to give you, and John's passing out a couple of them, some tennis balls, okay? And when you go back and do this training, tennis balls, they're cheap, it's easy to use, and believe me, they're just as effective and just as distracting. You want to get out one of our...
What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take out an airsoft pistol. I want you to know this is an airsoft pistol. This is not a real weapon. I'm going to have the safety on it, and it's going to be unloaded. I'm going to unload it right now. Mr. Wyrather is going to be the bad guy, and he's going to go outside that door. You guys are going to be the participants, and you're going to follow my instructions exactly, one thing at a time. But before we do anything, I'm going to take out the airsoft gun. This is a simulated weapon that we're going to be using in our live simulations in about 2 hours. I'm going to take out the clip. The safety is on. I'm going to take the safety off. There could be a pellet that comes through. There is not. I'm going to put the safety back on. Mr. Wyrather is not going to fire this weapon during this simulation. Mr. Wyrather is merely going to come in and orient himself with the OODA loop. Our job as participants is to distract and disrupt that loop. If you could step outside. Now, Mr. Wyrather, when I say go, you come in.
Okay? Be loud. It gets loud out there.
I will. You guys could please stand up. Now, I can't emphasize this enough. This is just a part of the simulation that we're going to be going through later on today. Number 2, this is a last resort effort. This is when you are faced with imminent death, period. You're not running out in the hallways with tennis balls or with fire extinguishers. This is when you've barricaded, you've locked down, it has failed. Bad guy comes in the room, you do something else besides just wait to die. So here's what's going to happen, guys. Noise is a distraction. Movement's a distraction. Throwing things is a distraction. And I want to tell you something, Wyrather's tough. He can handle several tennis balls right to the face, okay? And I encourage you to aim at the tender spots. And I want you to move around, and I want you to just don't get hit. He is going to be orienting on you and try to get a hold of, to try to shoot you. If you want to be out in front, you may. If you want to be behind, you may. You kind of look like sitting ducks right there. I'd move around a little bit. When I say go, bad guy's coming in, I'm ducking, you defend yourself. Mr. Wyrather, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Go, go, go!
Everybody down! Everybody down! Everybody down!
Stop! 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 Stand down. Stand down. Can I have the weapon, please?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead and have your seats.
Someone had a liver shot over here. That was pretty good.
Go ahead, sir. It's your floor.
Okay. There's a big difference coming in and having, it's a very disconcerting feeling to have stuff flying at you, okay? And, you know, I've shot guns plenty of times. I'm not a horrible shot. I'm not as good as the police officers. But there's a big difference in that than if none of that stuff was flying at me, okay? Where my instinct is to, one, protect myself, okay? I'm not wearing a baseball cup today, so that would have been, okay? So obviously I'm crouching down. I'm trying not to get hit. Than if none of that was going on and I came through the door and nothing. And now boom, 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 okay? Easy. Everyone's sitting down, stationary targets. Nothing's coming at me. I can observe the classroom. I can orient myself. There are no distractions. I can decide very quickly who the easiest targets are. And you're not going to make it. So, very effective. And that's a tennis ball, guys. Okay? That's a little tennis ball. Imagine throwing boxes. Fire extinguisher. Fire extinguisher, actually, depending on some of the carbon dioxide ones, they're loud. I mean, it is distracting. Okay? So anything we can do to disrupt that OODA loop, we want to do. Now, I said fighting's a last resort. Okay? I said we're not going to teach kindergartners to swarm or attack an intruder, and we're not. But as adults, in a situation, depending on where we are, okay, there are some things that we can do. We're going to show you a technique that is, we call swarming, okay, just to show you how effective numbers can be against a person, okay. Darren, you want to come up here? I'm going to pick on Darren, since I know him. Let's just stand up here. I'm going to pick a couple other people here. Let's see, would you like to come up, please? You, come on up. Brian, why don't you go up there? Okay. Ma'am, you want to come up? Okay. Gentlemen, I want you to come down here, and one on each side, and I want you to grab around the leg, okay? Just like this. Okay? Now don't hurt him.
Don't take me
He's
down.
old.
Single leg takedown here.
Right?
No
Okay.
wrestling.
It's not WWF. Ladies, if you could grab each arm, okay? Like this. Grab each arm. Lock in on either side. Okay? And I'm going to move this out of the way here. Okay? Now, Darren is a pretty big boy. Okay? He's pretty strong. I know it because we've gone at it a couple times. Okay? He's a friend of mine. We've got 4 people here. Darren, all I want you to do, I don't want you to we're not fighting them or anything like that. I just want you to try to move forward. And when he starts to move forward, I want you guys to provide resistance, okay? Get a nice low base, a little bend in your knee. Hold on tight. Darren, try to move forward. Okay? No way. Okay? And so, very effective. Now, again, it's an option, okay? It's a last resort option that when you're faced with something, I want you to think about a good situation like this. Gabby Giffords, out in an open space, lots of adults around. That incident was over well before law enforcement got there. That incident happened fast. It was only literally a couple of minutes, maybe not even that, when that went down. And ultimately it was stopped by citizens taking down the intruder. And he couldn't move. Okay? So, controlling the legs and the arms, that's a swarm technique. It's an option. Thank you, guys. You guys can go sit back down. You see this little graph here, and what this basically is telling us, these are casualties by category since 1966. And here's what's interesting about this particular graph here, is that the casualties go up dramatically based upon number of killed, number of injured, and just the total number of both of those, when the incidents are resolved after the police show up. Remember, the police can be there within 1 to 12 minutes. there's quite a few people in this room that are from some very outlying districts that response time is going to vary, okay? It probably is not going to be 1 minute unless they're there already for something else. It may take 12 minutes plus if you're out in Lost Hills or somewhere out there, okay? So, if you're waiting and you're being passive, those counts go up dramatically. Shooter-resolved incidents, this is where they kill themselves. They've shot enough people to satisfy their need, or they think they've shot enough people to be famous, to get some notoriety, and they take their own life, okay? That's where the graph falls. And the ones where the victims are not passive, where they're proactive, where the victims have barricaded, they fled, they fought back. Look at how dramatically the number of killed and the number of injured goes down. Huge, guys, huge. The whole idea of this program today is not something that John and I made up, okay? It's common sense stuff, and it's been out there for a while. Okay, the whole idea of running, hiding, and fighting is something that's been endorsed by Bakersfield Police Department, Sheriff's Department, Department of Homeland Security has put out a video, Run, Hide, Fight. All of these agencies have the same type of idea. All of these agencies know that a proactive response is better than a passive response, that doing something is better than doing nothing. There's also another key here. I'll put 2 other bullet points here. I want to talk about them briefly. The first one here says threat assessment and prevention. There really is no solid profile of a school shooter, okay? There's some statistics that they've piled together, but we can't say that every kid that's been bullied is going to come on campus and that's going to be the trigger for them to shoot someone on your campus. Not every bully is a school shooter, okay? And we hear a lot about bullying in the news, and bullying is something we should work very hard to prevent. But not every bully is a school shooter. There's varying degrees of what causes these types of incidents. Not everybody who plays violent video games will come onto campus and shoot a gun. So, threat assessment is key because you have to really have an open mind and be really a tactical mind when it comes to looking at things that are occurring on your campus. It's easy for us as educators to rationalize behavior as just, oh, he's just being a kid. Oh, that's not a big deal. You know, he's only 12. He wouldn't hurt anybody. It's easy for us to do that because it's hard to think of events like Sandy Hook and to rationalize that in our mind. So we try to make excuses for it. We have to take these things seriously. Okay? For the thousands of things that you go through in a career of incidents that turn out to be nothing, that's great. But it's the one that turns out to be something that we want to prevent. So it's keeping a tactical mind. And I'm not saying to be paranoid. We don't want to reach a point where we're paranoid that someone's going to come on our campus and shoot our campus up. We don't want to be paranoid that every kid who draws a scary picture is a school shooter. We have to fall somewhere in the middle, okay? It has to be on our mind, but we can't obsess about it. We can't be paranoid and thinking everyone's going to get us either. Have a tactical mind. Have a tactical mind. Other thing is bullying prevention. I did say to you that not every bully is going to shoot up a campus. That's true. But bullying prevention is important. And I know that today with Seth's Law and all the different policies that we have to have, that every school district in here is probably doing some type of bullying prevention program. We do at our school district. That is an important part of this. And why it's important is simply in the relationships and the contacts you make with kids. The more contacts you make with kids, not just one adult, maybe they've made contacts with 2 adults or 3 adults, and those relationships that you form, that is a great part of preventing not just a school shooting, but any problem on your campus. You have to form those relationships. Luckily, for the Taft incident, that kid obviously had a relationship and knew the people that were involved. That was a very rare incident that didn't follow the pattern that we've seen in all these other school shootings that have happened. And that's good. I mean, no one was killed. But it certainly was helped by the fact that they had a relationship with that kid and were able to reach him. Most of the time, those students are not thinking about that. What to expect when police arrive. These slides here, we consulted with the Bakersfield Police Department because we felt it was important that if you're in one of these incidents, you ought to know how to behave when law enforcement arrives on scene. Because when they arrive on scene, like I said before, they are in charge. How many have an evacuation plan when there's an emergency and let the two go to one place? Let's say the football field or the playground in your district. You have an evacuation place. That's great, and almost everybody does. We do too. When there's a fire drill, we go out to the playground. In Taft, it was the football field where they were supposed to evacuate to, as in many high schools. Okay. An active shooter incident, that's not always going to be the plan that you're going to follow. Okay? You are going to evacuate where law enforcement tells you to evacuate. Okay? You are going to evacuate where fire personnel tell you to evacuate. They are in charge, the emergency responders are in charge when they arrive of that situation. So every policy that you have and every plan that you have has to be flexible during an incident that's an active shooter incident, because the rules change when someone's waving a gun on campus. What to expect when police arrive? One, and you're going to get to, this is going to be neat today as part of the simulation, is that you'll get to really see how cops respond to these scenes and the process that they go through. We're going to pick a couple people out during this. You're not all going to have to be victims. You'll take turns getting to see just what the cops face and what they have to deal with and how they respond. When they do that, usually in small teams. Like we said, it could be just one person who arrives at the campus first. They may or may not be in uniforms. Look at our officers today, back, Ted and Joe. They're in nice, ties. A lot of times they're dressed that way. They may be in tactical gear. They may be in uniform. Just depends. You're probably going to have a mixture of all those things on scene. They could be armed with various weapons. In a situation like this, they also may have to use, depending on the situation, pepper spray or tear gas. You need to prepare your people for that. That's a scary thing. When they arrive, they may be shouting commands at you, pushing individuals to the ground for their safety. They're not going to be assisting injured people until the shooter is stopped. Their job is to neutralize the shooter. And they have a very difficult job to do. Imagine if you are the officer who is responding, you have people running at you, you're trying to figure out who the shooter is, to neutralize the shooter. It's a very chaotic scene. And so they will be shouting at you. It's not to hurt your feelings. Okay? It's not to scare you even more than you're already scared. It's because they have to control the environment. They have to control that scene. And they are trained to do it in a specific way and to be able to have you follow commands. It's very much how we're going to run today's simulation too. When John goes through that simulation with you, he's going to be in charge of it. The cops are going to help us make sure that the area is safe that we use. But it's very black and white, and it's very much about following commands. An important way to behave as an adult on that campus or as an employee, as hard as it will be, is to remain calm and to follow the officer's instructions exactly. Please put down bags, jackets, things that would conceal your hands or that would cause them to think that you might have a weapon in any way. Immediately, when you're faced with the officers, raise your hand, spread your fingers, okay? Let them know that you don't have the weapon. Avoid making quick movements toward the officers, okay? I know some of you and some kids, some employees, you can think of these employees' names in your campus, might need to be consoled. They might be upset. And as nice of guys as these are, they don't want to hug during this, okay? And they're not going to hug you back. They need you to have your hands up so that they know that you're not one of the shooters. Avoid pointing, screaming, yelling. Why do you do that? Because it disrupts the OODA loop, okay? You're screaming at them, my baby, whatever else you're screaming, they're all dead, whatever. okay? And people are overreacting these incidents, and they say all kinds of crazy things. All that shouting and yelling, it disrupts the OODA loop. It disrupts them from orienting themselves to the situation and finding the shooter. Please do not stop and ask the officers for directions or help, especially that first team in. You want them to go right to the shooter. Just proceed in the direction from which the officers entered the premises. I'm going to repeat that. Proceed in the direction that the officer has entered the premises. If I'm in this room and they're telling me to get out, I'm going to go where they were because I know that they've cleared that area. Okay? They have a systematic way of doing this. They'll show you a little bit of that today, but you want to go where they were because you know that's safe. Okay? Information to provide to police or 911 operator. This really goes along with the whole idea of alerting people on campus. Just as you want to give them as much intel as possible as to where that shooter is and what they look like, you want to do the same thing if you have the opportunity to call 911 and talk to the operator. Okay? If you listen to the Columbine 911 operator, she asked some of those questions. Again, a very stressful situation. You got a little bit of a description out for what she saw, but they want to know things like the location. Where did you last see them? As descriptive as you can be. How many shooters did you see? What did they look like? Number and type of weapons that they had. Number of potential victims at the location. Physical description of the shooter is very important. The better you can be at describing who that person is, what they're wearing, what they look like, it makes it that much easier for those first responders who are trying to neutralize the threat. Okay? First aid. How long before EMS arrives? Well, they might arrive relatively quickly, actually. They could arrive in the first couple minutes, but it doesn't matter because they can't go in until law enforcement has deemed that it's safe to go in. Okay? They're going to be staged and have a staging area somewhere and until they get the word that it's safe, it's a safe area for them to go into to treat the wounded. So there could be times when you're waiting a long time for EMS, not because they're not there, because they haven't been cleared to come in. So you want to have an idea and talk to your employees about basic first aid. I know a lot of employees get CPR and basic first aid training, but there's some other things that I want you to think about and some little tips and tricks that I want to talk to you about that might aid in that process. There were times, if you talk to anybody from Taft High School, in the Columbine incident for sure, hours went by before some people were treated. Some of them who initially survived the initial onslaught of the bullets died because they bled to death before they were able to be treated because they hadn't cleared the scene yet. So you have to know how to control bleeding. It's a very simple process. Okay? Most of us know from our basic aid training that you have to apply pressure. You can create something like a belt or a jacket to apply a tourniquet above the wound. Elevation also helps stop bleeding. Anything you can do to stop the bleeding is going to help that person. When you're talking about an active shooter incident, you also need to be able to be kind of creative as to looking around for things that will help stop the bleeding. I mean, people have clothing and jackets and stuff and compresses you can put on there, but sometimes you may not have those things available, and you can use other things. It seems a little silly to say, but tampons, a great tool. There's usually tampons at a school. Tampons are about the size of a bullet hole, and putting that in there can help control the bleeding. Again, this is where you have to get creative and use what you have with your surroundings. Victim removal. Okay? I'm going to just go over a couple different things. We're not going to practice these things here today. Okay? But obviously if someone's been shot or someone's been hurt, they always tell you, what you've learned from first aid, is that you really shouldn't move them. You got to make sure that you control their spine and make sure that they could have an injured spine or a neck, and you don't want to move the victim unless it's an emergency. Well, sometimes these situations it is an emergency because you have to get out. So there's different ways to move people that we can help you out here. Again, Darren, I'll use you again because you're just right here. Okay. If you have more than one person, it's helpful. Depends on how injured the victim is. From just assisting them like you would a kid having them put their arm around, and helping them just as a crutch. Okay. Also, if you can reach around and grab their hands, okay, by their wrists, so you got a good hold on them right here. That's a pretty effective hold that you can drag. Let yourself go limp. You can drag them, okay, out a door. You can even use that same technique if you have them sitting in a chair. Sit here in the chair. Matt, you want to help me? Okay, move you out here. Okay, same thing. Get on that side. Having them sit in a chair and picking them up from that way. You can have someone grab them that same way, and 2 people on each side holding the chair for them. By grabbing them by the wrist, a little chair carry, that works too. Whatever you can do to move them out. It is an emergency situation. If it's faced with a shooter coming in, and you have somebody injured, and they're alive, you want to get them out of there. Okay. The other thing you want to think about in a lockdown situation, if you are locked down in a classroom, temporary latrine would be helpful. Again, this could take hours for them to get to you. There has to be a place for them to go to the bathroom. People in different school districts have run into this problem. Some of you have, buckets in a pod or something like that. But having a temporary latrine is a good item to have. Food and water, also very important, depending on how long you have to be in there. Again, many of you, I think, have little emergency packs. But it might be good to do a check of those things to make sure that they're up to date in the classrooms. Those things are kind of out of sight, out of mind, and food expires. You want to take a look at that. I want John here to talk about liability, which I'm sure is on people's mind when it comes to a program like this.
Anytime we're in a situation where we are faced with imminent danger, harm, death, we're going to either run, hide, or fight. That's what's going to happen. But when we're sitting in here in a room thinking about it, learning about it, we start to worry about all the liability issues that's going to happen. I want you to know something, that if you have a shooter-intruder on your campus, you will be sued. If you have a fire on your campus, you'll be sued. If you have an earthquake, you're going to be sued. We know that in our business, we have the potential of being sued for everything, every single day. It's a reality. But when you're faced with evil coming on your campus, you don't want to be paralyzed with thoughts of what if. What if we do this? What will that lawsuit look like? What if we do that, how much money is my district going to lose? We want one thought only, and that is, we will survive. My children will go home to their mothers and fathers tonight. My friends will go home and hug their wives and their husbands tonight. That's the only thought that we're concerned about at this time. We all subscribe to schools' legal services and things like that, and we have insurance. We'll let the lawyers deal with the rest of it later on. We don't want to have a paralysis through analysis. We don't want to be thinking about that at the time. Here's an interesting thought. If the bad thing occurs, what defense do you want to offer? When you're sitting before the lawyers and you're sitting before the judge, alive, by the way, because you get to answer this question, do you want to say something like this? We mandated through policy that the occupants sit passively and wait for help. This is what we trained our people to do. We trained our people to sit there, and by God, we required them to be there sitting, waiting passively to die. Or do you want to say we provided a range of options and communications in order for occupants to make a decision as to their best action to take given the circumstances they faced? The whole point of this training, guys, is to give people options and then to give them permission to make a decision. I know where the Norris School District stands on this. We're going for Part B. We're providing our people with options. We're giving them permission to exercise those options. I guarantee you, liability will give way to survivability when the shooter steps onto campus. The last thing on your mind should be, what happens if the lawyers come and get me? The lawyers are going to come and get you anyway. Be alive. Go home. See your family. Make sure that your friends and your children get to as well. Expectations for employees. We want to keep a tactical mind. Remember with the case at Columbine, with Patty Nielsen thinking that it was a drama play, thinking that it was a cap gun. Do you know how you know you have an active shooter on campus? You have a guy with a gun on campus. That's when you know you're in danger. And some people would say, but what happens if it's just a joke? What if someone's with a toy gun on your campus and it's just a joke? And you respond correctly and tactically, and you evacuate, you run, you hide, you barricade. There is no practical joke. Anybody coming on your campus with a gun, fake, real, or otherwise, is an intruder shooter. Anybody outside of your gates with a gun is an intruder shooter. You go to your next activity quickly. Keep a tactical mind. Review your safety plans. We all have them. Make sure that your safety teams are in place, that you're reviewing them at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year. Have your drills. Have other options within your safety plan for intruder shooters. Know your options. You guys know some options, and real soon we're going to be able to put them into place. We're going to be able to practice those options. Make sure your employees also know their options. Have ongoing training. The thing that Dan and I talked about a lot since our initial training was that we wanted to make sure that we spent the most of our time on the least expensive thing, training. We didn't want to buy a bunch of gizmos. We didn't want to buy a bunch of placards and cards and this and that. We wanted to train people. We wanted to equip them with options, have them with ongoing training so that they can continue to think tactically and survive. That's what this training is about. Today, you have just completed Tier 1. Tier 1 is the universal precautions for your school. Now let me tell you something. What we're going to do in the Norris School District is we're going to train every teacher, every custodian, every bus driver in the same training that you just completed now. They're going to get that information. Then we're going to offer Tier 2 training, which some of you will choose to do at the end of this classroom situation here in about 10 minutes. The reason why we're going to give the option for Tier 2 is because it's rather dramatic. I want you to think about some of the second grade teachers that you have on your campus, or some of the 7th grade teachers you have on your campus. They probably don't need to be in a building with a face mask on fighting someone with an airsoft pistol. They have to be given the option to take Tier 2. And we're going to run that as a volunteer basis. They're going to come to us as principals and they're going to say, I want Tier 2. We get a group together, we're going to train them, they're going to have certificate of completion on Tier 2. What we predict is it's going to be much like the CPI response that we had, Crisis Prevention Intervention, where we didn't say everybody's going to do CPI. We said, who wants it? We'll give you a demo, who wants it? And a few people showed up for the first training, and then it went like wildfire. People loved the training. They saw that it was successful. They saw that it was useful. And now we have a bunch of people in the Norris School District trained in CPI. We see the same thing for this active shooter response course. That's what's going to occur on our campus. But I want to stress this for you. You have the choice. You have the choice to either bring this back to your district or reject it now. You have the option to go back to your school district and say, I think this is something we need to review. However, I want to say this again. This needs to go through your board. The worst thing that you can do right now is to go from this training, say, this is the best thing since sliced bread. I'm going to do it at my school if you're a principal. I'm going to go rogue. I'm going to train people on my campus. Don't do that. It's been done before in Pennsylvania. And what happened was the principals got so far ahead of the board, the superintendent got so far ahead of the board, that when there was backlash from the community, the board came back and punished the superintendent and punished the principals. You do everything correctly in the chain of command and get permission. But I give you permission to either reject it or to take it back to your people. This is about giving people options and giving them permission to make a decision in the moment. That goes from the training all the way to the simulations. Make sense? Okay.